thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We like to start with a bit of an introduction. So if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, who you are, where you're from, that sort of thing. It helps individuals to connect with your journey.
Okay, my name's Joe Bruce. My husband jokingly refers to us as the Bruces, like as in Robert the Bruce. And I'm from Edinburgh in Scotland. I love it here. It's a beautiful city and I'm very lucky to live here. People come from all over the world. Actually, I didn't start off here. I came from a little town in Devon, and like a lot of people, I went to university, or what you'd call college. I fell in love with the city that I went to college in and stayed, and my whole life has been here since. And I've actually tried to move away, and I've worked in Luxembourg and I've worked in London, and always ended up coming back to Scotland is the home where the heart is, so to speak. Technically speaking, I'm from England, but my heart is here in Scotland and I'm from Edinburgh.
So we're here to talk about your journey with me. The full name is, you could probably say it a lot better than I could.
Myalgic Encephalomyelitis, ME, sometimes called chronic fatigue syndrome, but very controversially so, and none of the patients really like that name, so we stick with ME, and we accept that it's more widely accepted in medical circles to talk about it as ME/CFS, as in a combination of the two.
And so there was a time where you were unaware that you had me. What was that like?
I was a typical wild redhead in my 20s. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to explore. I loved going out dancing. I was very into my career, which is in finance is a very big thing here in Edinburgh. Not dissimilar to London. It's a big financial centre. Lots of opportunities to climb the ladder, even without qualifications. If you were talented and hardworking, which I was, I got to kind of middle management level by my late 20s, and that's when I got the opportunity to go and work in Luxembourg, which again, amazing, crossroads of Europe they call it. So I was really a lot like most other 20-somethings in Edinburgh, living life to the full, out all the time, healthy, active, and really looking forward to a future. I had it all planned out. I didn't think it was going to be me. I'd never even heard of ME, really. I'd heard in the 80s people talking about yuppie flu, but I didn't really know any more than the sort of passing things that you see in the newspaper, which were all quite derogatory. Anyway.
And so you're young, you're driven,
Yeah.
a career in finance and moving as quickly as you did within that career, that takes a lot. That takes a lot.
My Spanish neighbor that I told you about, she used to call me the ghost neighbor because I was up and out of the house. I was usually in the office by 8 a.m. and first in the office and last to leave at night, That was my life and I loved it.
And so at some point you realized that from a health perspective, there were things that were not quite right. What were some of those early signs that you noted that sort of started you thinking that there might be something you needed to get checked?
It wasn't really me that noticed. It was my husband that noticed. And so I would get sick more than other people. I would, if there was a bug going around the office, I would catch it. If there was a cold, I would catch it, but I wouldn't just get the cold, it would turn into a chest infection. Or I wouldn't just feel sick, I would get a gum infection. Anything would turn into an infection. So it was, I think I ended up with chest infections and being on antibiotics a lot more than is normal. My husband never got sick and he would observe me being almost constantly sick and working through it anyway, push,
Yeah.
And so over time, I would start to have to take time off work. So it would be like a week and I would just be out for the count, sleeping. I assumed that it was because how I lived my life kind of burning the candle at both ends. At first I would be off, it would be like a week and I would need to recuperate and then I would go back to work and for about 8 months. And then over the space of about 5 years, 6 years, it went from needing to be off for a week at a time to needing to be off for like 4 weeks at a time or 6 weeks at a time. And slowly, the time that I needed to take off and how exhausted and just sick I was feeling. People misunderstand ME as just feeling tired all the time, but there's so many other symptoms. My stomach was constantly upset. I would faint. I would have these awful headaches. I would have nausea. I would have pain that migrated around my body. And over time, this just snowballed. I don't know at which point it went from me being healthy more than sick to sick more than healthy. But that certainly happened over a period of time. And I did keep going to the doctors. They did not join the dots for me on that at all. And then I think I got signed off work for like 3 months. And they said to me, you need to just rest, you need to eat better, and you need to work out. And I thought to myself, well, I already work out, I already go hiking at the weekends. But they sent me on this, what they called a lifestyle management course. And I was getting the impression while I was there, it's really hard to put your finger on it, but the impression that I was getting was that they really thought that you lacked the basic skills of how to care for yourself. Like, one of the things was sleep hygiene. They kept going on about sleep hygiene. Well, I didn't have a problem with that because I just wanted to sleep all the time. One of the other things they would talk about was, it's like a diagram of a plate, and you've got to have like 1/3 has got to be starchy carbs, and 1/3 has got to be vegetables, and a fist-sized portion of protein. And it's just like, why are you talking to me about what I'm eating? And I'm telling you, I've got headaches and nausea and diarrhea and pain. Why are you talking to me about my lifestyle? And I also found it quite patronizing. I found the whole thing quite patronizing.
It
At
sounds
some
to me
point,
like a program designed by someone who's never had ME.
yeah, yeah, well, largely I came to discover that it was largely viewed at that time in the UK as being psychosomatic illness. After 8 months of going back and forward to the doctor with these constant niggling, like disparate seeming set of symptoms, I sat there and I said, please, can you listen to me? I've been in here, every couple of weeks for the last 8 months. Please send me to see a specialist, because there is something going on, and it is not to do with what I'm eating or how I live my life. That's when I got referred to the Western General Hospital. They have a unit there, infectious diseases unit, that's what it's called. And there was a Greek doctor there who did some balance tests, various tests he did, and he said, yeah, you have CFS. Now, at that time, I didn't know that CFS was connected to ME. I also didn't know that it was connected to post-viral fatigue syndrome. But when I got home and I read the packet that they gave me to read, I suddenly realized I had actually been diagnosed with post-viral fatigue syndrome after holiday several years before.
Oh, wow.
And no one had told me that it could become chronic.
Wow.
No one had told me that it could become lifelong, completely debilitating.
So they had given you a diagnosis but never informed you of the diagnosis. That's terrible.
Yeah, well, they had given me a diagnosis of post-viral fatigue syndrome several years earlier, but what they hadn't explained about it was, well, what they said was, go home, you'll be fine, kind of thing. Like with the flu or whatever, like ride it out, it will pass. There was no discussion that it could become a chronic illness, no discussion of what to look out for or for the signs of it becoming chronic. And I realized that actually then I had been suffering on and off for 10 years before getting my formal diagnosis of what they called at that time CFS. I also went to see another couple people. They confirmed it, but that's when they started calling it ME-CFS or CFS-ME. Really depends which doctor you go to, how knowledgeable they are. They get very little training in medical school on ME, and a lot of them still think it is psychosomatic.
And so this Greek doctor did the balance test. What was that like? And was that then where it was definitive, or were there other things that he did that made things more clear?
So ME is actually, I'm going to get this right, otherwise I'm going to get a lot of hate from the community. So CFS is a diagnosis of exclusion. And what that means is when they have done like a bajillion tests on you, run every blood work that they can think of, everything comes back normal. Everything keeps coming back normal. You're fine. So, but ME, apparently, it can be seen on MRI. You can see a SPECT scan. You can see inflammation in the brain. However, you cannot get a SPECT scan in the UK on the National Health Service. They don't believe in it. In fact, the care pathway that the doctors had to follow back then was, once you give them the diagnosis of CFS, discourage any further testing because it plays into this
Oh no.
psychosomatic need that they have, almost like a Munchausen type need to keep getting tests done to validate that they're sick. I realized that I was up against a system that wasn't made for me.
Sure.
And it made me very angry and very upset. I tried to discuss it with my doctors and they diagnosed me then with depression. And I kept saying, listen, I may be depressed, but I'm depressed because I'm sick. I'm not sick because I'm depressed. I'm angry and I'm depressed because I'm banging my head against a brick wall with doctors who don't believe me, who don't believe my lived experience of my body, who don't believe that I know my body and understand my body. And so I went to the courses. I must admit, I got a bit fed up of the courses I was sent to and kind of quit. I quit the lifestyle management one after the 6th one. It was like a group support session. Now, I just want to be really, really clear about something. I am not invalidating mental ill health at all. I just want to be really clear about that. People who've got depression, it is a brutal, horrendous illness, and it deserves every treatment and every empathy. And any other kind of mental ill health, bipolar, schizophrenia, those are real illnesses. But what I'm saying is, if you tried to treat somebody with a multiple sclerosis or cancer with mental health treatments, it's not going to work, right?
Absolutely.
So all I was asking for was a treatment that was appropriate, to my situation, as opposed to what I felt was happening, which was being fobbed off. And the reason why this is so important now is that this is happening to a lot of people with long COVID.
Absolutely.
So long COVID is very similar to ME, and it's also being psychologized a lot, both in America and here in the UK. And we in the ME community, and actually all of our charities, organizations, we're all behind the long COVID community, like 100%, because their story is our story. It's just in a lot of cases, we didn't know what our triggering virus was or triggering infection. Some people had infections after having a baby, or sepsis, and they got ME, or some people had Epstein-Barr, which I think you call mono in America. Or in Australia, the yellow fever, and it always seems to come after a bout of some sort of infection. It can be bacterial, but a lot of people recognize that it's viral. So for me, I started listening to other patient stories instead of listening to doctors, and it was in the community that I found my comfort. I'm not crazy and I'm not lazy. Like my husband said to me many times, I am the worst sick person because I can't keep still and I always want to be doing something. And I used to say to him, well, maybe I'm just lazy. I need to sleep this much, or I get sick when I'm overdo things. Maybe I'm just lazy, And he was like, you're not lazy. You're not the least lazy person ever. So, and I hear this over and over again, people start to doubt themselves.
It's not easy, I should say, to disentangle, right, what you become accustomed to because of your illness from, what you would want to do and what you want to achieve, and how to not be so hard on yourself.
I mean, it's incredibly difficult, and I think you just have to, for the first several years, I was terrible at it. So for the first several years, I really was lost with that. I found my purpose initially trying to study for a job that I could do at home. So I started studying bookkeeping, thinking that I could be like a mobile bookkeeper and work from home. But I found that I couldn't even sustain that. And then in 2017, I saw a movie, well, a documentary actually, that changed my life, by a lady called Jennifer Breyer. It's called Unrest. And I would urge anybody who maybe thinks that they recognize themselves in my story to watch it, because if you have ME, it will resonate with you so hard. Like, I think about 5 minutes in, Jennifer's husband says something. My husband just looked at me. We both started crying. It's just so on point. So after that, I decided to make a Facebook page, a Facebook blog for people to come share their stories and for me to share my story. And that was very cathartic. And I did that for about 3 years. And I volunteer when I can for research studies. And I volunteer sometimes for ME Action, which is Jennifer's organization. She has pods, cells. No, that makes it sound like terrorists. There are all over. So Jennifer launched something called Millions Missing, and I went to the first Millions Missing protest in Edinburgh. And what Millions Missing is about trying to get the medical community to pay attention to the research that actually does exist, and there is lots of it, that shows that our disease is not psychosomatic, that we actually have problems in our mitochondria producing energy at a cellular level. We have problems with lactic acid buildup and it doesn't clear away like healthy people. We have immune dysfunction, that there is a plethora of papers that show that ME is actually a multi-systemic disease. It affects everything from sleeping to eating to going to the bathroom. It affects every single part of your body.
And that's one of the challenges, right? Doctors specialize. They will specialize in one area. And if their toolkit doesn't work for that one area, they pass you on to the other person who might have a different specialty and they'll apply their toolkit. No one is trained to work across organ systems in the way that ME impacts an individual. And so that becomes extraordinarily challenging, right? As you navigate the system, right? You probably felt like they weren't listening, but they were probably just working with whatever tools they had in their box. They weren't equipped in the right way, perhaps.
I mean, I would like to be as generous and as kind as you, but what we've actually discovered, and there have been studies about this, is that there's an amount of stigma attached to ME because doctors still believe that it is psychosomatic. So part of ME Action and Millions Missing for the last 5 years has been about actually trying to get the medical community to pay attention, as I said, to the research that already exists and expand it. So I was reading quite recently, when you look at disease burden, there's something in America called the dailies, which talks about disease burden, and it compares funding comparative to disease burden. So the disease burden for ME is about the same as end-stage renal failure or HIV or breast cancer. I mean, we are up there in terms of disease burden, but in terms of spending, the NIH, I think it's called in America, just the spending is down the lower end of the scale. I had these numbers before I came on to speak to you, but I can never retain things in my head. It's difficult. It's the old brain fog. Stuff goes. But basically, you'd have to increase funding by tenfold to meet the disease burden of ME compared to funding as it is now. And one of the big problems in the UK is that the funding that has been given has all been given toward psychological research and not biomedical research. So a lot of what we're trying to do in America and in the UK is trying to get more funding for research, but also to divert it away from psychology and psychological treatments, if you like, toward biomedical ones. And we've got some amazing scientists throughout the world working on it. One of whom is a gentleman called Ron Davis, who's like the father of the human genome in Stanford. Unfortunately, that's because his son has ME, which I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Never mind someone as lovely as Whitney. But what that means is that we've got some amazing, talented brains like Ron working on ME.
I'm convinced that this is exactly what it takes, right? Individuals like you sharing your journey, and particularly the fact that, you were high functioning, performing, contributing, and then all of a sudden you could not because of illness.
Yeah.
That contrast brings it home that it is not something, you're not lazy, it's not in your head.
Met this amazing Brazilian cyclist, a guy who he was able to sum it up like this. He has ME. He was competing at quite a high level and he was diagnosed with depression. And he said to his doctors, I don't think I am depressed, because a depressed person would walk into the hallway, look at their bicycle and not have the motivation to get on the bicycle. But I walk into my hallway and I look longingly, wanting to be able to get on it, got every motivation to be able to get on it and feel the wind in my face and the sun on my skin, but I can't do it because it will make me sick. And I just thought that's what it is. That's in a nutshell. I don't lack motivation, but what happens is the more I push, the sicker I get. And that's why it's so important to say to people with long COVID now that you mustn't push through. You must stop and rest and pace yourself. Don't push, because if you push, you will end up like me. I pushed for 13 years and ended up, permanently disabled because of it.
And you spoke about your identity, right, wrapped into work and losing that. Over what period of time did that happen? And how did you come to terms with the transition, right? Because a transition from a career, then, the home bookkeeping to now not working, it was a big part of your identity. So how did that go?
It didn't go well. I would say that there's definitely a grieving process. So I think overall it took about 4 years from when I was diagnosed. Initially, when I was diagnosed, I went part-time at my job, but I was pretty much instantly sidelined and managed out the door, if you know what that means.
Sure.
I sat down with my husband, we thought about it, we made a plan that I would slowly work towards being able to go back to work. So I spent 9 months. So we're in like 2013 at this point. I spent 9 months really slowly building my health back up and building back up a little fitness, really very small increments. And so after 9 months, I went and got another job.
Okay.
I declared my disability with them up front and said, over here we have something called reasonable adjustments that you can request from your employer, but they denied me reasonable adjustments. I wanted to be able to work on a more flexible schedule. I wanted to be able to work at home, and they said no. So after 9 months of being back at work and having to push through more and more and having to travel to London and Newcastle, I crashed hard, big relapse, and I ended up being off for 6 months, I think. But I still wasn't really willing to let go of the idea of being able to work and being able to have a career. If only they would, work with me, with my situation, but they wouldn't. And fortunately for me, I've always believed very much in unions. So I had the protection of a union, and that went legal, and I got a payout. But as I said to them, that's great and everything. What happens to the next person who comes along? And also, what happens when this money runs out? It wasn't a big sum of money. It was like, I don't know, 6 months salary or something, So then I thought, well, I'll try and get a part-time job, but I'll make it something really low-key, not anything to do with my career, like administrator for a local charity, just 24 hours a week. And so I did that. I didn't last 3 months this time. So you see, as the time went on, no matter how hard I tried, my ability to sustain whatever activity I was trying to do consistently grew shorter and shorter and shorter. So by this time, we're in like 2015, so over 2 years, my husband sat me down and he's like, you have to stop. You have to stop. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to end up in hospital, permanently bedbound. He said he is making enough money for us to live on. It was a big adjustment in terms of lifestyle, and I felt really bad because when he married me, this was not what he signed up to.
He sounds like a great guy.
He is phenomenal, and he hates me saying it, which makes him even greater. I mean, we have shrunk our lives down a lot. No more the holidays or no new car. We live within our means, and we are very, very lucky that his job allows that. We don't struggle to put food on the table like I know some people do. So I'm not moaning here. I don't want any pity for that. I'm really lucky that he is able to take care of both of us, and we have a roof over our head and we have food. But it was an adjustment.
I mean,
Plus,
a lot of your friends are probably still in that life. How was that, experience? Are they understanding? Have they stayed with you?
They have not stayed with me, no. I don't have any. They are gone. Over time, you lose them over time. The last ones that I lost was really kind of at the beginning of the lockdown situation with the pandemic. Obviously, I'm very vulnerable to COVID, especially in the beginning. Delta probably would have killed me. And they were out there campaigning for measures to be removed because they wanted to be able to go to the pub or get their nails done or send their kids to school. But the person I thought was my closest friend was actually campaigning to get the schools opened. And it hurt deeply that she would prioritize her lifestyle over my life, the lives of many of the people who've become my friends in the chronic illness community, the people who I consider now my real friends, the people on Twitter and on Instagram and so forth. It was a real shock. I couldn't believe it, actually. I can't even find the words for that.
No. I mean, the thing that I reflect on is that unless individuals experience something themselves, it's really impossible for them to understand. And it's one of those really difficult things, even for people who care about you, right? For them
Yeah.
to sort of put themselves forward in that way. So it's very difficult. And so it really does take others who have experienced illness like we have in order to find that community, if you will.
Yes, and they're the most loving, caring, gentle, funny people in the community. They really keep me going. I mean, to consider what some of these people have been through and are going through, the humor, the dark humor, I love it. They really.
Fantastic.
I've got a friend called Alison, Ali's Head, she's called on Twitter, and her dark humor is, yeah, I log in just to see what she's got to say about the day. It's very funny.
That's fantastic. So we kind of stopped at 2015 to 2022, right?
Yeah.
What was your journey like, sort of adapting to not working and to living at home and that kind of thing?
So I felt so bad for my husband that I wanted to become like a 1950s wife. You know, I wanted to do all the chores at home and stuff, all the cooking, all the cleaning. What we soon found out was that wasn't possible either. So 2015 was when I started studying bookkeeping. I've kind of gone through a series of things that I thought I might be able to turn this into work, you know. So I volunteered with something called Work for ME, writing policy documents for them, and then I volunteered for Action for ME as like they do like an audio version of their magazine for people, and so I would record me reading some of the articles. So for the audio version of the magazine, I did that for some time. 2017 was when I watched Unrest and when I started my blog. Well, it wasn't a proper blog like a professional one that you would see, you know. It was a page, Facebook page. It was a little popular. There was a little community of us there. It was cathartic for me, and also I helped quite a lot of people. I remember in those years there would be quite often times me, you know, speaking to someone in the middle of the night who had lost the will to live, you know, and I really felt a strong purpose there in trying to support other people in the community. I spoke at the 2019 Millions Missing. I volunteered for research studies. Whatever I can do, I do, you know. I realized that the blog was affecting my mental health. I was getting angry, so I had to step back from that to take care of my own mental health in terms of my anger. And now what I love to do is more creative pursuits, like to make gift baskets for family of soaps and candles, things that I make myself, you know, shower steamers and bath bombs, things that only take, you know, a couple of hours to make, so I can just do it if I'm having a good day.
And I'm sure they appreciate the thoughtfulness as well.
Yeah, they love those. They love those gift baskets.
That's
My
fantastic.
sister's birthday was just on July 23rd, and I sent her one with 2 candles and 3 soaps and wax melt. She said she could smell it before she even opened the box. Yeah, I like that. That's good. Things that fill my life are my chinchillas, my fluffy children.
Very cool.
Yeah, we couldn't have children. Obviously, I'm too sick, and it would have just been too much pressure on us as a family. We actually got the boys the year after we got married in 2013, and they are the center of our universe.
Wonderful. And I'm sure they appreciate being the center of the universe as well.
Yeah, they do pretty much. One of them, Bertie, pretty much thinks he rules the roost around here. So yeah, he's the boss of us, that's for sure.
That's fantastic. And so, you know, so first of all, Jo, it has been wonderful to learn about your story, hear about how you have made these very difficult transitions in life and how you've managed through, you know, whether it's learning to sort of ratchet back expectations, to be kind to yourself as you readjust those expectations, whether it's managing through the crash when it happens. What are the things that have helped power you through and continue to keep doing a lot of the wonderful things that you're doing for the ME community?
I'm going to be really soppy here and say it really is about love, so lucky to be loved as much as I am by my husband. I really, really love him, and he really lets me feel loved. I think one of the biggest fears and difficulties for people in this situation is a lot of us lose our relationships. I've spoken to many women who've lost their relationship. David and I work so hard at respect and space and love. The love of him and the love of my two fluffy boys are what keeps me going. Also, the sense of injustice keeps me going. I want us to be kind of the last generation that goes through this. You know, Emmy runs in my family. And when my little sister got diagnosed, that was when I felt that, okay, it might be too late for me, but I don't want it to be too late for her. I'm going to keep doing whatever I can for as long as I can. And even if that's just being noisy and kind of annoying, you know, just keep the noise going. If it helps one person more, if it helps one doctor to hear, or well, what I'm experiencing now actually is a lot of medical frontline people who have long COVID starting to recognize that they might be developing ME, you know, and those people have a lot of contacts still back within those systems and those networks. So helping them get the word out, keep the change rolling until we get a kind of tipping point. That's what we need, a tipping point. When we've reached the tipping point, then I will stop and rest.
Beautiful word, a beautiful mission. I'm very happy for you that you have the love and support of your husband and your two boys. Joe, it's been an absolute privilege to be able to speak with you today, to learn from your journey, to hear your words of how you've managed through and your encouragement, right? To keep up the noise, because the opposite of noise is silence, and nothing happens if it's silent. So
That's
I
right.
appreciate it.
The bad messages fill the silence. So we need to make sure it's our messages and our stories that are filling the silence. And we really do have Jennifer Breyer to thank for that. You know, she sent out a call to arms. I just joined it, you know, that's all. And the one last thing I would say to everyone, make room to laugh every day. You know, even if it's at something stupid, even if it's at yourself, you know, that keeps me going too. Love comedy. My husband makes me laugh every day. You have to laugh. So love and laughter, they're the biggest things in the world.
Agreed. And wouldn't it be a great thing if the millions missing became the millions heard, and even better, the millions loving and laughing?
The millions loving and laughing, yeah. Hashtag last generation.
There you go. Thank you so much for taking the time. Take care of the two boys. I'm sure they're missing you right now because you haven't made them the center of the universe for the last hour or so.
Seeing as the interview's over, do you want to meet them? Because they're sleeping right now, but you can say hi. So I don't know what
Okay.
you
Sorry
can
about
see.
that. But yes, I am seeing you, and oh my, whoa!
Hey, baby. Hi,
He's
Basil
got
Bear.
his ears are bigger than mine. That's awesome.
Woohoo! He's a very cute boy. This is Basil, or
You are beautiful.
Basildon. And the other
Basil.
little guy, he's kind of sleeping up here on his hammock. His name's Bertie. Hey, Bertie. Hi,
Bertie.
Bubba.
Oh man. That looks so comfortable. I want one of those. I want one of those hammocks. I want to crawl into the hammock.
They are, and you see, they have like a townhouse mansion thing going on here.
That
A-
is
And,
gotta be the
and they're
and a castle.
princes and castles, yeah.
Oh
When I
my
said
they
they were the center of the universe, I really meant it. Like they're so spoiled, it's ridiculous.